So, from my perspective, and I don't know this as a flat fact, so I'm spitballing, but one or two things is true with Epstein. Either he offed himself or somebody offed him. And in both of those cases, it seems that he was given space to do just that. Meaning, most people, and I can't say most people, but I would wager that most, or at the very least a large share, looks at what took place and say, bullshit. It looks as if this is dodgy. This doesn't look right. I mean, this guy who has all of this money running essentially a world-class international pedophile ring with all of these various politicians and business leaders and so forth, he gets arrested. He gets put in prison and is probably the highest profile prisoner in our jail systems. He's on suicide watch because he gets supposedly tried to hang himself in a jail cell where the guy who was in the jail cell with him didn't hear squat. Meaning he's trying to fashion and trying to hang himself, and apparently he's doing so silently that the other guy still gets a good night's sleep. He gets put on suicide watch. And while he's on suicide watch, apparently something goes awry with this and the schedule changes, but the two officers that are supposed to be with him, supposedly, fell asleep. The security camera that was supposed to be watching the hallway was down. And when the first person did the autopsy, they came back and they said, it's unclear on what this is. Now think about it from the perspective of the people in the jail. What if you came back and say that Epstein, this wasn't a suicide? What if you came back, you're the medical examiner, and you come back and you say, somebody killed him. He was strangulated. He didn't do this on his own. And we have these markings that give us this kind of telltale signs that he didn't do this on his own. What happens? What happens? What is the pressure on an individual to not say that? Think about it from their perspective for the moment. You're in that particular company, at that particular jail, working for this particular whatever, and you're like, this guy got murdered. They come back and say it's unclear. Barbara Sampson then comes back and says, suicide. And everybody said, this don't look right. This don't look right. A second medical examiner, world class, does a medical exam and says this guy was murdered. The ligature marks, the breaks in his neck, those things aren't commensurate with somebody committing suicide. Those things are commensurate with somebody being murdered. This gets more interesting, right? It gets more interesting still. The two security guards that were supposed to be watching Epstein has just been arrested. This just broke today. Those security guards were arrested. Now, supposedly, those security guards fell asleep at the job. Both narcoleptic at the same time. That's mighty bizarre. All of this is bizarre. That's why I don't necessarily entirely buy this notion of him committing suicide. In fact, the moment that you make the argument that says he was given enough space to commit suicide, meaning I think he killed himself and he was given space to do it, you also, that argument is the exact same argument of space was created for somebody to kill him. Just saying, both of those things work in tandem with one another. But whatever, all sorts of people can spitball in regards to what they think is going on with Epstein. I've heard some people say, I don't even think that guy's still dead. Who knows? I am sympathetic to either he offed himself or somebody offed him. And I would say with the medical examiner, the new one that came back and says, yes, this guy killed himself. This guy has no allegiances to anything, who's doing the exam, as opposed to the person who's in a prison who has somewhat of an allegiance to maybe not create this much fire. The two prison guards have just been arrested today. And I'm just going to read the story. The story is interesting. It's not long. But the Epstein thing is catching a bit of heat. Prince Andrew, and what I suspect is the weirdest, I don't know if he's just in a bubble and don't know, like just massively unself-aware. I don't know what's going on in his head. I watched that interview this morning at like 5 a.m. And I'm like, I can't believe I'm hearing this. Like, Prince Andrews makes the argument that I never seen that woman. Meaning, I don't remember that particular party. First point. Then he says, when I was in the war, I was shot at. And I was so terrified in that moment that my adrenaline surged, masturbatory. And I lost the ability to sweat after that. And so it is impossible for me to be on the dance floor with her and be really sweaty because I lost the ability to sweat in that moment. And the interviewer, awesome, just cuts through him. Like, she's not aggressive towards him. She's it's weird. It's almost like she's not neutral, but she's not attacking him. She did an amazing job just allowing him to hang himself because it doesn't make sense. I am partial to this notion that Epstein might be with a young woman. She might be giving a massage or something. And Andrews, when she goes to get coffee, might lean over and be like, God, she's hot. These are people of a particular class. And of this particular class, with this notion of the world as a resource, they may consider her a resource also. And it only takes one moment for Epstein to be like, you like her, huh? I guess my point is, I don't buy Andrew's story on this. I mean, Andrew says, I went in order to tell Epstein that our friendship is over. And she's like, yeah, but you stayed for like 4 days. He says, yeah, I mean, I can see how that would be a little weird. And she's like, and you were the person of honor at a dinner. He says, well, I mean, a dinner? I mean, it was just a few people there. I don't know if you can call it a dinner. It was the weirdest interview in the world. His publicist quit over that interview because she was like, oh God, this is going to be a train wreck. And it was absolutely a disaster. Nobody believed him. Nobody believed him. It is hard to look at that interview and take him seriously. He said, I'm royalty. I'm royalty, baby. I would never be caught out without a tie and all this other stuff. And I was at a pizza joint that night. It's like, you were where? I mean, God, man. At one point, she says, well, this guy says that you are getting a foot massage or something by a young Russian girl. Well, that didn't happen. Are you saying this guy is lying? Now, if you told me that, Jamarl, I saw you having sex with the Pope, just ramming it in with the Pope, I would say that shit didn't happen. And you say, yeah, but Bob Johnson said that he saw you with that. I don't have to know who Bob Johnson is to say Bob Johnson is full of shit because that never happened. In her case, are you saying this guy is lying? And he's like, well, I mean, I'm just I don't know who this guy is and etc. What does it matter who he is? Either it's true or not. If it's not true, you don't need to know the identity of the individual to say, yes, that guy's lying. That's my point. If you say that I robbed a liquor joint and I'm like, no, that's nonsense. That's full of shit. And he says, well, Rodney Jones said you did it. Well, Rodney Jones is full of shit. Are you saying Rodney Jones is lying? Yes, Rodney Jones is full of shit. I don't need to know who Rodney Jones is to know that Rodney Jones is full of shit if I didn't rob the liquor store. It's just a weird interview. I saw the interview. I was like, God, he's lying through his teeth. I don't believe him at all. And the Brits, who considers him royalty, didn't either. 2 New York correctional officers were responsible for guarding Jeffrey Epstein the night he was killed himself, have been charged in connection with his death, it was reported Tuesday. The guards named Tova Noel and Michael Thompson were expected to appear in court charged with offenses related to their alleged failure to check on the disgraced financier and sex offender, the New York Times reported. Right here. The 2 guards fell asleep, based on the New York Times. Epstein had left for several hours before he was found. The guards allegedly falsified records to cover up what they had done. Epstein, 66, had been placed on suicide watch after he was found unconscious in a jail with injuries to his neck. That watch had been lifted before Epstein's death. The suicide watch had been lifted. They were still supposed to check on him. Look, I don't know what's going on with this. I mean, it is possible that they're trying to put the screws to see if there's any additional information. I mean, I got to be honest. If you are part of the prison, say for the moment you're a prosecutor that's responsible for dealing with this case, how do you deal with this? I mean, if you're an honest, rational person, do you think to yourself, how do you fall asleep at the exact same time? How does the light go down or the monitor go down on this particular hallway? Why is he in this particular jail cell? Like, there's so many questions that are associated with this. What do? Do you try to find the truth, or do you try to put somebody in prison for it? I would hope that the prosecutor is of the type that is actually looking into why this weirdness, even if that means putting screws onto these two who apparently fell asleep at the exact same time. That sounds just the weirdest thing in the world. But we'll see. Who knows? All of this stuff is a black box at this point. One last point. Ghislaine Maxwell. The way Andrews talked about Ghislaine Maxwell is bizarre right off the bat. Initially, if you notice, he didn't necessarily mention her name, even though you knew who he was talking about just because of the way he was talking about her in relation to Epstein. Maxwell has been instrumental in this international pedophile ring. Bid on Pedophile Island, being in the airplane that Bill Clinton was a guest on multiple occasions. Meaning if you're going to go after Andrews, Bill Clinton also need to be asked some questions. And Ghislaine was instrumental in all of this stuff. She was the person that was apparently finding the young girls to feed to him. She's like the herald of Epstein. It's like the herald of Galactus. The Silver Surfer went out to find planets that they can feed to Galactus. In this case, she was like the herald of Epstein. She would find young girls and to feed to Epstein. How is she not being prosecuted? What the fuck? How is she not being prosecuted? You might say that Andrews has diplomatic immunity. Does Ghislaine Maxwell have diplomatic immunity also? How on earth does she skate without being asked questions by a prosecutor that is looking to put her in a prison cell? Especially if you're going to say that Epstein was guilty. How on earth does she skate? How on earth does she skate? I'll leave this here. Like, share, subscribe. Thanks all. Yeah, the herald of Epstein. I'm sorry. I think in terms of comic books at times. Look, something has to shake loose on this. I am so angry that Epstein is dead. Because I wanted him in a jail cell. I wanted him to be asked questions. This dirty cover of the rich. This notion of this kind of unaccountable power that is allowed to kind of be outside of the public spotlight in regards to the things that they do. I don't believe Prince Andrews for the moment. And if I don't believe him, there's likely others. The question becomes who? Who are those others? And is Maxwell the key to finding those others? And why on earth is she not being asked questions? There was a recent article that came out saying that Maxwell wanted several months in order to disclose other people within the context of a civil suit, and the people who were against her are saying, no, you don't have, I give you 7 days. So stuff may shake out in the context of a civil suit. But why a civil suit? I mean, we're talking about a pedophile ring. Like, they're literally transporting girls across the world for powerful men. Giovanna Lavana, remember that Monty Python's Flying Circus skit, the upper class twit of the year. Want a winner for that? Prince Andrews, yes. That was a horrible interview. Honestly, what? This video wasn't supposed to be about Prince Andrews. It's in my head because I just watched it this morning. I've never seen a train wreck like that. Maybe R. Kelly when he was in that interview where he was like flipping out. But this was a different fail. Like, this was a fail of a man that is trying to convince you of something that you're looking at. That you're saying, bullshit. You're saying bullshit. Like, share, subscribe.